Hi, I'm Joseph Kim, the CEO of a games studio called Leela Games, and we are working on an extraction shooter for mobile.
Hi, my name's Oliver Jones. I'm co-founder CEO of Bombay Play. We make casual gaming from India for the world. Sorry, for the world.
Hello everyone. I'm Kannan Raju. I am country head for Scopely India. I've been behind running a few games for Scopely from India.
Hey guys, my name is Robbie, founder and CEO of Super Gaming. I'm making Indus, an Indo-futuristic battle royale for the world.
Okay, now we need an introduction from the audience, right? How many of you are currently building a game for global audience? Good. Okay, how many people are planning to build a game for the global audience in the next 2 years? Great, okay. That sets the stage. There's about 25% of people who are currently building and about 40 to 50% who are planning to build. That's great, right? So before we get started, I just want to set the context, right? If you look at India, there are a lot of recent successes of game studios that are targeting the Western markets, global markets, and we are hearing a lot of success stories like Super Gaming, Play Simple Games, Bombay Play. So there are so many successes that's homegrown. We also have big studios that run their complete games from India, like Scopely, Zynga. We are in forefront of the global scenario, but still, global market is about 180 billion, right? And we are less than 1% of it, right? But the story is different if you look at just the Indian App Store. In Indian App Store, in the top 100, top 10 grossing are from Indian studios. And top 20 downloads are from games from Indian studios, right? So maybe the focus has been more on the Indian homegrown audience and not on the global landscape. So we are here to just give us our perspective why it might make sense for you to target the whole world as your audience, right? So for the panel, we thought we'll just flip things up. So before we get into the discussion, we start with some rapid fire. So we'll go like this, we'll come back, and then we'll get into some interesting topics, right? Joseph, one advantage to target global audience from India.
One advantage
Yes.
is just the size of the market. The global market is huge, so the ability to go onto a single platform that has 1 billion people attached to it, right? And be able to potentially monetize that is the, sorry, I'll keep it
Audience.
short. Yeah, there you go.
Oli, same question.
There's a lot of external investment flowing into India that will fund teams with big ideas.
Got it. Funding. Kannan.
Ability to quickly build a team in India is really interesting.
And Robbie.
Great developer talent. We now have a generation of people that grew up playing games, unleashing those people on the rest of the world. That's kind of our mission.
The volume of talent. Okay. And Robbie, one disadvantage of targeting global market from India.
Nothing here has been built from scratch, ever. So mostly it's live ops, all of that. So teaching people, learning how to do IP, learning how to kind of run the whole hog in terms of, right from creation till live ops, that's really the challenge.
I think for developers in India, understanding the diversity and the needs of a global audience is the biggest challenge that I see.
Actually, I think the biggest challenge is that not everyone agrees India is the best place to be building games for the world. And as such, you do get like some senior talent that could be working for companies in India doing amazing work, choose to move abroad, which is, I think, a sad thing.
I think the disadvantage from my perspective is basically I still think there's a little bit of a skill gap. Now that's starting to be addressed, but I think the ability, and the reason why we don't see enough games developed out of India that are top grossing games, I think will come as we develop more skill here, and not just from a live ops orientation, but around new game development as well.
Got it. Okay, so next round is rapid fire. So one word only. In the global gaming market, is more competitive or Indian gaming market is more competitive? Just one word. Just starts with Joseph.
I'm not I mean, it's hard for me to speak about the Indian gaming market because I haven't launched games specifically for India, so I can only speak for global. But yeah, I would say like overall, and so I do talk to many game developers globally, but there's a lot of people that are depressed right now. I don't think they should be, but a lot of people are very skeptical right now of the current market. And I'll keep it short, but yeah, I would say global market right now is challenged.
Oli.
I would argue, I mean, it depends on the lens on which you look at the market, but I would argue that the Indian market is actually quite competitive. Many people would see it as like a blue ocean, but from what I've seen, like a lot of the key categories, so it's speaking as somebody who co-founded Moonfrog and we built content for India, we saw challenges after the first sort of key categories were sort of taken, like Rummy, Ludo, Team Party, Cricket. And so if you want to, in at least my own opinion, and I can be very wrong about this, if you wanted to attack India, you have to go after, like specifically, you have to go after culturally relevant content. And there's a lot of competition going after sort of just a few categories. I think if you have a more global view, you'll see a lot more blue spots. And that does include sort of Indian content for the world. I also think that's equally as valid.
To me, I think global market is definitely competitive from the perspective that there are already a lot of established players. They have deep pockets. They have a lot of expertise in dealing with global market. So from that angle, global market is the most competitive.
Definitely, the global market is a lot more competitive, simply because you're competing against best of breed. The Indian market is less competitive in that sense, but if you want to really build a sustainable business, you have to be massive in India. And that's where it gets as good as globally being competitive, because you're competing against essentially the same people here as well.
Absolutely. Cool. So, Robbie, we'll start with you, right? Why did you choose to build from India for the world?
You know, a couple of things first, just from a background, was a very early iPhone developer. iPhone gave me distribution, which has allowed me to build for the world. So that's obviously the first big part. Didn't really have to invest in sales and marketing. You know, you got distribution. So that's one. Over a period of time, our lens kind of changed. As we started building here, you know, teams got better. You know, people came in with background of experience, grew up playing games, better studied games as a career option. Eventually became a lot more ambitious by doing smaller games, launched many games, had many failures, launched a few things that became successful, then figured out and saying that, okay, here is something that we think we can run at scale because we have a significant advantage here in India. So we think of our advantage as two parts. The first part of it is Indian art and culture is not represented in the world of gaming anywhere. We come from a very rich heritage of stories, and those stories are not told in games. We thought that was something that we could authentically tell versus anybody else. So that was an advantage that we had. The second part of it is just the right team over a period of time that knew how to do all of these things. So that's kind of why we're building for the world. Third, I'll add one more. Cheap user acquisition in India. You know, games get better with users. Once you actually got to a certain level of scale, your games got so much better without actually having invested a significant amount of capital to get people to play those games.
For me, obviously, I come from Scopely. So it all started with believing India has, you know, very good engineers. That's how it started. But I think from then it went to, oh, we have very good product managers. We were able to build the ecosystem of product managers. Obviously, the artists, there are artists, a lot of talent in art function across the board. And you could build something, a large art team in a very short time. So we started with more of running smaller games. And then it's about building confidence to somebody who's running larger game that India can do a lot more than what they've been doing. They can do a lot bigger games completely they can own. So it went from just owning a piece of a game to owning a small game to owning a large game. And now we have reached a state where we are running a large game, completely owned by India, highly profitable. You own everything. You own direction, you own UA, you own the budget. It's really about proving that you can create a evergreen title from India, you can continue to run from India.
Okay, so the question is, why did we choose in the first place? So I mean, three reasons. First is kind of organic. I was just here, you know. So I'd started my career with a job at Zynga, and then over the course of a decade, sort of got to know people in the development community, very sort of talented folks. So I guess over time, it just became very tough to justify going back to the UK and starting a game company with no network. The network was right. I knew the talent was there. Which leads to the second thing, which is that talent, like the people I was working with, had a high risk appetite. I think that might not exist in countries where the costs of experimentation might be higher. I think in India you can experiment at you can bootstrap. You can Bombay Play for the longest time was just 3 people in a basement until we got to our first $1 million. And then, but the reason we were able to make that money was because we took a big risk on our first game and did something nobody thought would be viable. And I think, I mean, it's good and bad, I guess. But because there's maybe a bit of a lack or a skill gap, people feel that they have it's easier to get the conviction that you can do it despite the odds. So you see, very hungry teams, and as such. Leading to my third point, venture capital goes after that kind of person, the kind of person who has crazy ideas and thinks they have a realistic chance of taking on the incumbents from India. So first reason, network is good, community is strong, there's lots of venture capital and risk appetite.
Fantastic. Yeah, and Joseph, this is something that I always wonder, right? Like how, I can understand even Oli because I know him, right? But how did you choose to build from India for the world?
Yeah, and I think in my case, it was a little bit different because I did actually look at many different regions globally. And I think when we were first trying to figure out where to build, just kind of starting from a blank slate, we tried to think about where we could build a lot of long-term structural advantage. And I think that, I don't know how long you want me to speak to this because I could give you a very long answer, but I think when there actually aren't that many places in the world, I think that if you're trying to build globally where it makes sense and you can have a lot of advantage, but I looked at Finland, Germany, Latin America, Eastern Europe. I think for political reasons, I did feel that there was eventually going to be a split between the US and India versus China and Russia. And so we wanted to be on the US side of that. So that was one reason we didn't really look at, for example, China, where I had many more connections and relationships. But fundamentally, I think the answer that is not correct, but that a lot of people would often ascribe to us, is that it's because of cost. And I think that the thing missing about that is that, sure, China, India may be lower cost, but we're also operating on billion-person platforms, right? And so really the limiting factor there, if you can build a great product, is going to be skill and scale. And so I think really the way that I would think about it is ultimately, like any place or any way to be successful, it really comes down to the people. And so, there have been times when San Francisco used to be the center of the gaming universe, and then it's kind of declined, and then it's kind of like LA. And I think Turkey's kind of developed, China's developed, and I think that the game development ecosystem here in India can develop and can become a center of global excellence in the future. And it just depends on the people. And what I mean by that is Steve Jobs, before his death, gave a commencement speech at Stanford, and one of the things that he ended his speech on is the Whole Earth catalog, the last message from the Whole Earth catalog, which was, stay hungry, stay foolish. And so I think that the place ultimately that's going to succeed is the place where you have the people that are hungry, that really want it, that are willing to commit and do what it takes to be successful, and who are foolish. And foolish in the sense that you're working on something that people may not believe that you'll be successful at, but you still pursue that because it's worth it.
I would second that. It feels like everyone I work with all the best people that I work with have something to prove. And actually, when we're hiring at Bombay Play, we tend to filter out people who, feels especially like they have something to prove.
Got it. And Joseph, you also mentioned, right, one of the disadvantages is the skill gap and the training, right? Can you elaborate a bit on it?
Yeah, I just think that, for example, I think if you look at the historical context of India, there's been a lot of great skill and expertise developed in terms of live ops. But as far as new game development and the kind of skill and requirements around new games, I would submit are fundamentally different. It's, and I think the characterization based upon the Peter Thiel framework of 0 to 1 versus 1 to n is applicable here, right? And so that 0 to 1 skill, I think, is quite different. And so having more of that kind of thinking and that approach is something that needs to be developed here, in my opinion. And then I also think from the perspective of game design and free-to-play game design, as well as certain, kind of like getting a greater talent pool for front-end engineering. Certainly there's a lot of incredible back-end type of folks, but on the front-end side, whether it's for, Unreal or Unity, I think would be helpful to help enable teams to be stronger.
Got it. And Robbie, you also face this challenge, right? You are also having to develop new IP from India for the globe. So how did you tackle this challenge about the development talent depth and 0 to 1 problem?
I think the first thing is probably, the talent is not spread everywhere. Need to find that talent, need to nurture that talent. We've been a magnet, been early, been a magnet, nurtured the talent, built it over a period of time, had a philosophy of talent building, attracted the right people at that point of time, who were then able to go deep dive. All of my founders have worked together for over a decade. Me and the CTO of the company worked together for 20 years. And now that kind of challenge or that kind of stability allowed us to bring talent and build one-on-one. Till today, we are bustling with that talent. And that's allowed us to be a lot more ambitious in some of the thoughts, ideas, and also engineering inside of it. But I'll still address the skill gap question. I still think that there's a lot of things to be learned. But what has changed is there's a whole new generation of game makers who grew up playing games, who've built careers using, in games, worked probably in different places around the world, studied in different places around the world, and are now here with you. Nurturing that talent is one part. The second part, I would say still, that's a missing piece, is I would say product management, roadmaps, how to build pipelines, how to think about live ops, roadmaps. Like these are all things that are still not solved even at our studio. And these are things that India still needs to solve. But I feel very confident in terms of seeing a few successes and seeing the number of global games being built out of India, where people have worked on some of these games and are coming back or are being part of these teams, is going to change the equation.
And Kanan, do you face similar challenges? Do you face any depth of talent in any particular area?
The kind of challenges I have seen is more about understanding your audience, right? Because you can have a team of X number in India. Now, 70% could be probably younger. In one case, I was looking at what is the average age of the team versus the average age of our audience. And there is nobody within that range, right? I was the only one close to the age group of the players. So those are the kind of challenges. Now, how that translates into challenges is that you don't understand your players, then starting from how you build your feature to core loop to visuals, everything kind of changes. We had a lot of, just to give an example, you want to design a character, but your player audience is somewhere median age is like 45. Do you design someone who is 17, 18 years, or do you design 35 years old? Is it male or female? So those discussions, without understanding your audience, goes for a longer time. That kind of results into longer development cycle, as well as the quality of the features that you're building. So we have learned over a time. A lot of experimentation helps. A lot of player insights help. You reach out to your players. You ask, hey, here are the options that we have. What do you think that works for you? So we kind of learned our way in bridging the gaps. I think off late the teams are very open about, okay, it's okay that I don't know everything about my player, but it's important that I need to learn about my player. So that's kind of helpful. But I would say that's a bigger problem for any new team that's kind of coming in, building anything, whether it's the new product or you are taking something that's running, you are trying to scale. That challenge still remains. But there are ways in which you can kind of solve it.
What are the ways that it's work?
I mean, the ways are essentially try to get a clear understanding about your players. For example, in one of the game, maybe you try to study the profiles of your players, try to understand what are the different profiles of the players that you are serving, and understand their life choices, preferences, their lifestyle. Spend a lot of time about understanding the culture of your players, language, culture nuances, all of that, and then doing a lot of experimentation in deciding what is the right thing to build in the product. Right? These are all certain things that's really helpful.
Ollie, I have a different question for you.
I had an answer for the last one.
Okay, let's get with the answer first. Then we'll go back.
No, I was just thinking about talent, actually, in the context of just Bangalore, specifically because Bangalore is this weird place where, like, the infrastructure is crap, but, like, everyone's making a crap ton of money building these startups. Like, in 1 or 2 years, you can end up with, like, $1 billion valuation in Bangalore. That kind of thing happens. So, really, the lack of, I wouldn't say it's a lack of talent, like very smart, talented people are building these companies, but they just lack patience. I think the real deficit is patience in a lot of cases. Why should you spend sort of 3 years building a very quality piece of entertainment when, you could be trying to solve an immediate need and trying to get on paper valuation as high as possible. I find that this especially applies to like product folks, engineering folks who've gone through sort of the Zynga and, I'm not sure what Scopely's like. I've never worked there, but where we're kind of taught from joining is that we're taught that you've got to do a product review every week and you've got to show how you've driven revenue up every week. So you need to do a release that drives revenue every week by at least like 1% or more. And that's how we're trained. That's what our model of success is. And it's very difficult to sort of change that mindset and give somebody sort of a sense of purpose in building something more for the long term. And I think it's a solvable thing, but it takes time.
I mean, I want to kind of iterate on what Karan said. We definitely found it very hard to kind of think about when we don't have the user in the room with us, or it's not a game that we have access to thousands of players who play that game, which is reflected in our choices of games. We only make those games now that we know that we can find 1,000 players to talk to tomorrow. That's kind of been one of the ways that we've kind of bypassed the guessing your user persona and kind of making games that either you know really well or you have access to those demographics.
So when you mean those 1,000 players are in India or they are accessible?
In Viman Nagar, where our studio is, if you throw a pizza party, you'll get those people to show up. That's kind of the audience that you want to build for. Because I do agree that trying to guess that from 1,000 miles away is much harder. But if you have access to that player base and you have people that you can actually show every change that you made really quickly, iterate, fix, then product development is helpful, not just for the developer, because think of it, if he knows how fast he can go, he knows exactly what to do, he can go much faster. And that's really what our company philosophy has been.
And in your experience, you found the pizza party audience to be closer to your final audience?
Always, always. We always throw pizza parties and we have players show up.
Fantastic. Cool. So I'll go back to the question I had for you. Right? How is actually building for India different from building for the globe?
I mean, yeah, this is a tough one because I built for India for like 3 years at Moonfrog, and I think it's like which India you're building for is the real question, and understanding the nuances of the audience and what they really want. Uh, I think it's super tough as but there's some advantages being an outsider, sort of attempting that to execute on that, because really I'm starting from a blank slate, and I need to do a lot of research to sort of primary research to understand. In our experience, like India, the Indian gamer, is obviously mobile first, and their social experience is sort of mobile first versus, say, in the West where we had sort of couch co-op. So the games that seem to do well are the ones that kind of encourage playing in packs. I guess we call it pack theory. I think the more established term is meerkat theory. Like, why do meerkats hunt in packs? Well, it gives them an advantage, and in the same way in PUBG, hunting in a pack gives you a better advantage. So I think understanding those sort of nuances in a very, very deep way is how you succeed in India. Versus the world, I think you're. In the world, a lot of best practices are already sort of established, and it's about getting sort of feature and quality parity first before sort of, and then on top of that, succeeding in whatever innovation you're trying to achieve in your category.
Got it. And Robbie, you also have games that target both India and the world, right? So do you change anything when you go from India to the world?
Significantly. The approach, what we quickly learned about India is that given the penetration of internet, there's not one India, but multiple Indias, tier 1 to N, and everybody has different choices. Actually going there, visiting it, thinking about more from a grassroots approach, educated us and our entire team as we kind of looked at local habits, nuances, what they call a certain item in a game, how they kind of play, and that kind of differs, region to region, I would say. Thinking about that a little bit allowed us to kind of do it, allowed us to kind of build, so to say, if we have a skill transfer system that players understand, that's kind of been something that we really did. But again, from an India perspective, we only build those things that players in India already understand and operate really well. Because our thesis is, in India, if you want to build a successful business, not a game, you need to be massive. And that's really something that you have to understand really, really well to go after.
Got it. And Kanan, how big is India as an audience for your games? And do you do anything specific for India?
I think India is probably, for a couple of games, the audience size may be meaningful, but not in terms of revenue numbers. I think there are a couple of games still, there's always a debate, should be, for these games, should we focus India? But our focus still remains on where the monetization opportunities are pretty high.
Got it. And the next question is around, is there any particular genre of games that is well suited for the Indian talent pool to target the Western audience? Right. We'll start with you, Joseph.
Well, I would say the way that I think about it probably is one, I would probably, for India, I would choose a game that is more client-oriented, just because you want to minimize server operating costs, and if you have a lower ARPU on a global basis, you probably want something that you can operate very cheaply. So the more client side, the better. I would also work on games that don't have significant technical challenge to optimize for lower-end device support. So, especially if you're working in, for example, Unreal, where strip down is very difficult, or even in Unity for certain games, like, I know Robbie and I work on the shooter genre, like that optimization is very, very difficult. So that's a challenge. I wouldn't say that should be a reason to avoid a genre, but it's an additional challenge. So those are some of the things that I think about for India. So not necessarily from a genre perspective, but more from like a cost and operations perspective.
Got it. Is there so you talked about the genre that we'll have to think about, right? So can you give us some takeaway genres that comes top of your mind for audience?
Well, I mean, like, one of the top 2 or 3 monetizing games in India is Coin Master. So I would say that, well, the top grossing game is Shooter. But if you're not doing Shooter, and if you want to create kind of like a casual game that is social, like Coin Master, I think that kind of a game could do very well in India.
So Rupee Master.
Ludo Master.
Is that the Bombay play attempt?
It's on the roadmap now.
Yes, to you, Oli.
So sorry, just the question was, is there any particular kind of genre that Indian talent is good at making, right? Okay. Yeah, I was...
Wrong question, sorry.
No, I mean, it was the right answer. Wrong. Yeah, but whatever. I don't think, other than like one or two outliers in maybe the puzzle category, there hasn't really been a huge win out of India for the world yet. I think Play Simple was the biggest exit. And so I would probably pick out that as like, well, very simple games that you could just, focus on immense optimization to sort of juice it as much as you can. But I wouldn't necessarily say, well, that's all we should do. I think what the real skill is perhaps maybe leveraging that lack of patience and doing lots of experiments and really what a company in India would be good at is optimizing for some game that has decent day 0 through day 7 retention. I know it's a slightly dated model now. People want to look further down the funnel, but I really do believe that, like, if you want to build up a crazy idea quick and just test that, engagement on like in the early funnel, I think the talent in India is really good at just like getting something out there and trying it and then throwing it away if it doesn't work. I think it's part of that weekly sprint sort of mindset, which really helps people execute fast.
Thank you. Kannan?
Yeah, for me, my lens will go from the talent, what I've seen. So we try to hire for casual games. We typically find people. One good thing about the talent in India is they are highly open. They are willing to try, willing to learn, willing to learn a new genre. But the talent has the casual games being simple and quick to learn. That's somewhere I feel the talent is really able to perform pretty well. The other angle is that you try to take mid-core or something more complex, and the space is highly competitive. So thereby, you also need to learn a lot about how do you get your installs at a competitive cost as your competitors. So from that angle as well, so I would kind of vote for casual. My second choice will be obviously puzzle from the successes that has happened from India.
I would take a slightly different take on everything said here. I think it's again who you are, what your timeline has been. The earlier versions of it, the local market and the kind of games that you played were mostly casual. You're building for what you understand really well, and that was successful at scale. I think today the market is changing. Today the Indian gamer is spending a lot of time playing games. I have 2 kids, 13 and 10. So kind of see it firsthand. Want to ensure that the money is going in the right place. But I also think that it's also, ultimately, it comes down to what does your talent want to do? I don't think anybody gets excited about doing something small. Everybody gets excited about doing something ambitious, but they also bring the right skill levels to it. And that's really been our kind of way to think about it. Doing something that scares us or scares everybody, building something that's global. But then we get all of our talent to come in together and show what they're capable of building. And that's been the most exciting part of our journey, of getting and seeing people do insane things that we didn't imagine was possible. I would also say that if you're building for India, you have very specific challenges in India, be it monetization, making a little bit of money at scale, from a lot of people. The second part of it is just optimization on devices. On the outside, it would be very difficult for people to even understand what a device in India looks like. And because we actually lived through those challenges, we understand how to fix that better. Be it network latency. India is the most cheapest data internet, but also the most congested. Instead of building real-time multiplayer shooters don't give you buffering like a YouTube or a OTT platform does, ensuring that you have built the right network or the right netcode layer is kind of something that were unique challenges that I don't think somebody from the outside would be able to understand. And that's really where India has kind of been some of our focus items.
But the bet to double down on something that's not done from India, like a shooter with Indian theme, sounds super risky, right? How did you have that courage to put up such a big team and go after it?
I think courage comes in from your past experience as well. When I launched Masgun, India was the 30th country that I launched Masgun in. Kind of saw that players are the same everywhere. We were one of the first games that actually didn't have Halloween and Christmas, but had Diwali as a theme. And we had people calling me up and say, "Hey, Robbie, what's Diwali?" I thought that went really well, kind of explaining our art, our culture to people. It resonated. Found players all over the world. I think players, play it for the game, not for just the art, but they also play for the story that you tell them of why you made the game. I think connecting on that kind of gave people resonance all over the world. Even today on Indus, we have 7.5 million pre-reg, but 3 million is outside of India, and we've not marketed anywhere. People play it for what you're building and why you're building it versus anything else.
Very interesting. Thank you. So I also want to bring attention to some of the problem that we've just touched upon, right? Like if you look at the global market, we have Turkey establishing itself as a really good powerhouse. We have Helsinki as the powerhouse probably 5 years ago, right? When do you think will be India's time, and what do we have to do to get there?
Well, yeah, you can't just become a powerhouse, like decide that you're a powerhouse. Yeah, you have to have successful companies in those countries that churn out top games that top the charts, and then only then are you a powerhouse. Yeah, so I think it's more on the grassroots level. We have to really take a big risk, really build content that is on par, if not higher than what's there in the global market, and only then do you really stand a chance of getting there. There's no shortcut.
Maybe I could chime in here. I think you need the right infrastructure, right? So you need the right kind of people. You need you need investors to come and invest, and you also need companies like I know Zynga was very influential here, and we've got a bunch of ex-Zynga folks starting new companies. And so whether it's the next, Super Gaming or folks from Scopely or from Bombay Play that learn the appropriate skills, are able to get funding from investors investing here and then starting other companies, I think that's the path forward. And so, if we have that right infrastructure of people, investment, and some ways in which these people can obtain the proper skills, then I think that's when it happens.
If this panel is correct, there are the people and we do have investment, then I guess we're out of excuses. We should be a powerhouse.
I also think that, gaming is not in our DNA in the older culture. You never grew up with the access to all of that infrastructure. I think you'll have to wait for a little bit more time where the younger generation starts spending on games so that you have a locally sustained ecosystem before you kind of see these emergent companies come out. Of people who understand all of these things in their bones. They're not trying to guess what a player wants inside of it. And they're also not shy of wanting the ambition of building world class. I think that's still a little bit away. We'll see some green shoots, we'll see some successes, we'll see lots of failures. But I do, long-term behavior, if you have 700 million people under the age of 25, that's a large opportunity.
Maybe one other thing I could mention is I do think one headwind for us is something that was discussed in another conversation earlier today is around this problem of perception that, with gaming, and this is something that, as a company here in India, we struggle with as well. There are a lot of great engineers who don't want to join a gaming company, right? Because their mom told them you should join Amazon or Netflix or Google or Flipkart or whatever. And so I do think that, coming from Silicon Valley, one of the big differences is that the perception of gaming in Silicon Valley is very different. It's viewed as an industry that is the most dynamic, the most changing, and very innovative. And so the kind of product managers you can hire, the kind of engineers that have scaled to a pretty massive way are coming from the gaming industry. And so they're highly sought after. And there's a lot of friends of mine who have gone from gaming to Meta, Facebook, Netflix, and these other companies. And so I do think that there needs to be more education and this change in perception for the right people to then start to come into the gaming industry here.
I'd like to add two things. I think one is definitely India is in the right track towards getting there. What needs to happen is the developers will have to come up with a lot of creative new games. Then, you have Teenpathis of world, you have 10, and why don't you build one more? And the other thing is that we need to build the ability or the ecosystem of talent where marketing to global audience is something that being learned. I mean, we need to have people learning about it, because I think Turkey seems to have figured that out with a number of games that they were able to successfully market and reach large audience, a global audience. So I think that is another thing that we need to happen. It could be a kind of catch-22. Maybe a hit will have to come. Marketing is depending on the hit, but I think these two are, something that needs to happen. I hope it will happen. And the part about this talk itself is right. If we have 100 startups, how many are focused on global? That also needs to change to get to that kind of place.
And Robbie, what's your opinion?
I think, like I said, success, some green shoots. I think we're very good at seeing somebody successful, and then you'll have 50 companies like that. So I think, people, we are very good at pattern matching. I think that's taught to us when we are in school. I think that's really something that people look for even in companies. So that's why, as Karan was saying, that, you have not got, if you have one successful Teenpanthi companies, you'll have 20. Similarly, we're hoping that, when people start seeing mid-core other companies or the harder stuff get done, that'll give them belief, and, the talent out there will also kind of, will create that pool of people who'll have the expertise of being able to build for something like that. And that's really the day that we're looking forward to.
That sounds good. Thank you. So we can take some questions. The audio is not great, so if you guys have questions, if you can come forward, maybe we can help you with the... Please come in.
Yeah. As a developer who wants to build for the world, one of the biggest challenges, as you correctly pointed out, is how do we exactly engage that market, right? Even if on the product side, you have the talent, you have the developers, you create a great game. How should we train or like prepare ourselves to like go and do that outreach? Any thoughts about that?
Sure. I think if you, I mean, you could do it directly, but it costs a lot of money. Like you can just go there. That's also perfectly valid. But I think when asking this kind of question, the real question is, how do I do so cheaply? How do I quickly validate these ideas with my target audience? And I mean, in a lot of people's cases, we'll use tools like Playtest Cloud to sort of run surveys with the actual target demographic that we want, and it's like a peer group of maybe 10 or so people. If you want to try a bit of scale, then sometimes finding a good lookalike country tends to work if you want to sort of test cheaply. So, I mean, at Zynga, we use Philippines a lot. Some people used to use Canada. I'm not sure if that's so much done anymore. But you can find that proxy audience and test over there to validate your ideas before you do your proper marketing kind of push.
Yeah, I think there's one part which is understanding the audience and being able to design a game for a specific audience. And certainly we've seen that there are definitely countrywide differences if you were to compare the top games from one country to the other. But I think from a scaling and distribution perspective, it's still largely performance marketing driven. And so that aspect is then really understanding your game's KPIs and understanding how to do user acquisition and understanding, how to budget for it and how to run that kind of thing. But I will say the advantage that we have today is that that's very scalable. And so if you have a great game, even if you're a very tiny team, you can scale to millions or billions. It's all possible. There are games making $1 billion a year. Many games doing that, and so it's very possible.
Hello. Yeah. So you were talking about how India has a lot of good developers, but not in gaming. And also there are a lot of good artists and craftsmen also that are there in this country. But when it comes to digital designing or digital art, that's kind of where a lot of the skill and talent is lacking. So what kind of a mindset change or legislation change, or what do you think will kind of help these people come up and join the gaming industry in the future? Because I don't think that talent is missing in India. I think the technical talent is missing. It becoming someone going from a craftsman or a sculptor to a 3D modeler in Blender or Maya, that takes a bit of time and understanding tools. So how do you think we get there as a country?
I'll try and answer that. I think it's already getting answered. You know, YouTube and tutorials are a great way of doing it. We see, because of just that access, we see a lot of talent, you know, similar to the Indian cricket team, where you have talent coming in from not the obvious places. Similarly, you know, we see talent in our office that's coming from not obvious places, and people who are self-learned. So the gap that you're explaining is people who don't know how to learn and don't know how to switch, you know, skill development and common things like might work. But there's a whole set of people who have access to all of these. And, you know, once they've got the will to do it, they're coming through.
That's all we can take. We are running out of time. But folks are going to be around here. You can reach out to them individually and ask any questions that you have.